Hi, I'm Mark from Property Ventures. Welcome to this week's New Zealand Property Podcast, where we interview the property expert around New Zealand. So welcome back, viewers, to the 2018 version of the New Zealand Property Podcast and video series. This is the first one, obviously, for this year, and we are going to have a video every 2 weeks for you. There will be other videos that we do during the course of the year, but we'll have the official podcast video series every 2 weeks starting from now. And we're very fortunate to have, I think it was the first person I interviewed with a podcast about 4 years ago, was this chap called Andrew King, and many people know him and many people don't know him, but what they'll learn is he's hugely important for any investor in New Zealand, because he's a link between the government, so I explain you, a link between the government and the investor out there, and he sort of fights our battles for us, I guess. Is that a good way to say it? Yeah.
That's fighting. It does seem like fighting a little bit.
Fighting, yeah. So welcome along, Andrew, and welcome back. And now it's a video, sorry, so it's not just the video, the audio, but welcome here. So, but first of all, just if you can just tell the viewers who what your role is within the Property Investor Federation, of what you actually do.
Yeah, sure. I've got a couple of roles actually. I started off with at the Auckland Property Investors Association, which is a wonderful association. Should all belong if you know not already. And that was about just over 20 years ago now. And from that, I became president for a while, and then joined the Property Investors Federation, which is the national body. So there's 19 associations around the country, and the Property Investors Federation does a lot of the advocacy work that Mark was talking about. It also does a lot of media work as well to try and get that message across to the general public, as well as the politicians and all the people behind the scenes, the policy advisors and people like that. So that's the main role, I think, of the federation. I used to be the president of that, and about 3 years ago I was actually appointed to executive officer, which is a new position which takes in all the advocacy work, so dealing with the politicians and all the behind the scenes people, plus doing all the media work and that to try and get it across to the public what the viewpoint of the property investor actually is.
Great. And I remember last time we spoke 4 years or so ago, what I learned sort of thing was, my take again was, when national government come in, they wanted to bring all these weird and wonderful policies in, and I think a part of your job is fighting the battle for and really explaining to them what it means to the end player, and the end player often is the tenant in New Zealand. And now we're going through a whole new change of government and Labor, and of course they've got some, again, weird and wonderful ideas on what to do, and some that's very, very good, and some might not be, I don't know yet, but I'm not going to comment on that. But so keeping that in mind and what your role is with it, what's your first impressions with the now Labour's and Labor and the other two parties have got in? What's your first impression from them?
Well, I mean, we have been dealing a lot with national as government, but we also deal a lot with the opposition parties as well. So we'll be dealing with national now that they're in the opposition. But previously we have dealt with Labor, the Greens, New Zealand First, the Maoris, so we deal with all the parties really. You kind of have to, especially in this MMP environment. So we do know a lot about it. We've talked a lot to the new Minister of Housing, Phil Twyford. He's certainly aware of our views. I think there is a difference perhaps between electioneering views and once you're in government type views, and there are certain things that are good and you think are the right things to do, but once you actually start getting good information, not just from us but from policy advisors as well, and to what is possible and what some of the unintended consequences of some of these policies are, they do tend to change. And so we have got dialogue with the government, and we are having input into that and pointing out where some of these things which they think are a good idea, and possibly they are, but the way they're implemented can sometimes have these unintended consequences. And most of them, as Mark says, are actually against tenants, unfortunately, which is the people we don't want to hurt at all, because they're our customers. And if tenants actually end up getting hurt, usually it's not good for us either. So the whole view from the Property Investors Federation is that we want to be advocates not just for rental property owners, but for tenants as well, for the whole industry. Because if tenants do well, we tend to do well, and vice versa. There's got to be a good environment where we can actually provide good quality rental accommodation at a reasonable price. If we do that, tenants are happy. So that's the key thing that we try and do, not to try and look at it from one point of view against the other, but to try and make it a balanced thing, because at the end of the day, that's where you get long-term solutions that actually work.
Absolutely, and I saw you on the AEM show 2 weeks ago, I think it was, and they were talking to you then about, I think it was about why investors aren't buying as many as they used to, or was it 20-30% or some big percentage of these homes being bought by investors, and that's a part of the whole big picture, I guess, of turning those policy changes into what can work for everyone, not just the tenant or just the landlord.
Yep, that's exactly it. And there are a few policies which are going to be problematic. Things like the ring fencing of losses. That will definitely make it harder to
go on to that afterwards.
Yeah. So there are a few things that we do need to work through and try and hopefully we can amend them, if not get rid of them completely.
Right. Okay, well, let's talk about maybe a couple of those policies you're thinking of coming in. Well, let's talk about the first, because for me that's the biggest, what you just said with the ring fencing of taxes, that could be the biggest hurdle or danger to any property investor right now in New Zealand.
Yeah.
We've always got to offset our losses and what have you.
Yeah.
What are they exactly looking at doing, so people that don't know, watching this right now, don't know what we're talking about? And what's sort of happening, and how do you think that might affect us, and how may Labor change from what they are thinking now?
So crystal balling,
yeah.
So effectively at the moment, if you buy a property and the rent doesn't cover all the expenses and you make a loss, you can claim that loss against other income that you have, or the tax against other income that you have. So it reduces the tax that you pay in say your PAYE or something like that. Labor believe that that's unfair, and that other first home buyers should have tax deductions as well, and because they don't, we shouldn't have that as a tax deduction. Now that's a tax deduction that's available to any other business, so we would, if it comes in, that this will be something which applies just to rental property owners and not to any other investment, which isn't a good use of tax policy really. You shouldn't really use tax to try and influence where people invest their money. So what they're calling it is ring fencing, where they're ring fencing those losses, and it means that you can't claim that against your other income, or tax you pay on the other income, and therefore it becomes a cost totally to you. So we've done a little bit of work on this, and the average New Zealand home at the moment, it costs around about $6,500 to actually provide that rental home to a tenant as a home in the first year when you bought it. Now that's assuming that you've paid an average price for an average property and you're getting an average rent. We all know that you can do a lot better than that, and we hope you can. But if you do buy that average property and do it, that's about what it's going to cost you. Now that includes a tax deduction of around about $3,500. So without the ability to claim that $3,500, it's going to cost around $10,000 to provide that per year. So that's going to make it harder. And I think what they've forgotten is that the harder you make it for people to provide rental property, the harder it is for those tenants to find a rental property.
Exactly.
So that's where that comes in. But there are things you can do about it, of course.
Even on those figures, sort of, it's not 6,000 or 9,000. An investor might buy 2 houses rather than have 3 houses. That's a third more houses, 33% houses less right there for tenants, I guess, in my simple calculations.
Well, that's exactly right.
Seconds, so
and the argument's been made that this is a good thing actually, because it means that you won't have investors, and therefore first home buyers will get a chance to get that property, and they won't be competing with first home buyers. The argument against that is the number of people per property. There are 2.1 people per property which is owner occupied, but it is 3.9 per rental property. So every time a rental property is sold to an owner occupier, on average you've got around 1.8 people who still need a rental property. And that's where the argument comes adrift. There's still going to be demand for rental property coming through, and we're already seeing that at the moment in many parts of the country. In fact, we've been seeing it for quite a few years as the costs have increased. Since 2010, we've seen that rental prices have actually been higher than average inflation, which it normally isn't. Normally rental prices have gone up with inflation, but they've actually been higher lately, and that's because a lot of our costs have gone up and it's been harder for us to provide them. So that's what we're putting forward to government, that don't do this, because it just makes it even harder for us.
And I mean, they're still saying that it's unfair. Well, the investor still doesn't get deductions against their own home. Yes, we might have different ways of trying to structure things to make it work to our benefit, but unfair. Or so where's it at then? So it's still in discussion stage with that.
It is.
Have Labor got a date they want to have it in by, or they don't say that because they don't know if it's going to come in?
They haven't said it yet, and they haven't said how it's going to be introduced either.
Yeah.
I was involved in a what do they call it? In a revenue. That we had a meeting with them anyway about it to try and find out what the likely ramifications are going to be, and how it would actually be introduced, whether it's going to be per property or whether it's going to be per entity or whether it's per investor in total. Just how is it going to be introduced, and what whether there's going to be any gradual moving into it, whether it's going to be 20% you're allowed to claim 1 year, or 80% 1 year, 60 the next, 40, so we don't know exactly how it's going to go, but we have said that it will have a big influence, and so it should be introduced slowly if it has to be introduced. And we should be looking at ways of minimising that effect, because it will have an effect on supply. We're already seeing it.
Massively, yeah. No, investors have already been hit since the LVR rules, what have you, and that's probably part of why the discussion came 2 weeks ago when you're...
That's exactly right.
So it's just another one of those things. I'll keep fighting our battles, Andrew. We're right behind you. Keep up the good work. So we'll see what happens. So it's not a done deal yet.
No.
Not by any means. We'll wait and watch, and that's good. What are other ones where healthy homes? What's their take on that at this stage? How's that going to affect us all?
Yeah, healthy homes is an interesting one. The Federation actually supports that we should be providing good homes for tenants. We think it is a good thing to do, and we try and promote that. And we actually supported the previous government, the national governments. They had a bill which went through called the minimum standards, where they did have minimum standards on insulation and a few other things. And we supported that and thought it was a good thing. The Healthy Homes Bill extends that out. It's basically saying, okay, that was good, but we want it a little bit more for tenants. And I guess one of the biggest thing that we're sort of worried about is the insulation. In the minimum standards, if you had insulation in the property and it was to the previous standards, not the current standards, then their government was actually okay with that. And we originally it was going to be at the same standards. We advised that it shouldn't be. It should be, if you have insulation and it's at the previous standards, that should be okay, because you only get a 5% improvement in insulation quality from going from the previous standards to these ones. And yet it's going to cost about the same amount to top up as it would to completely reintroduce new insulation into the property. So cost effectively, it just wasn't there. No, and so we argued effectively previously that it shouldn't be introduced, because it would basically push up rents and really wouldn't provide that much extra insulation for the tenant. So we supported the 1978 levels, and you might as well have it to the current standards if you're putting in new insulation. So we supported that as well.
Makes sense.
One thing we have negotiated though is that Labor is looking at giving a $2,000 grant to rental property owners when they do insulate or need to put out insulation. That's for the insulation, and it's also for heating as well. So that's good, but we haven't actually seen the detail of how it's going to go.
Right.
We've seen other government grants come in where it sounds good, like they say that it's going to be 50% government grant come in here, but the price doubles. So therefore your grant doesn't really mean much. And so we need to see the detail about what's going to go on there.
Okay, interesting. I remember about 5, 6, probably longer, many years ago, when they first started talking healthy home, I think it was healthy and safe homes, and it seemed, I remember there was this big long list of a 2-page list of things they were looking at doing, sort of thing, and then people realised, I think the government realised it was just too hard. So it's mainly now insulation's the main thing for heating and insulation, top and bottom if you can.
That's it. And they're talking, they've basically taken the same insulation standards as the national minimum standards, but just means that it has to go from the current level. So there's going to be a lot of top-ups which will need to happen, and they will be expensive, unfortunately. The other expensive part will be that there needs to be a fixed form of heating. Now Labor have been talking about making that a heat pump. However, we're not sure that the heat pump will go through. It's not always the best heat source, but there will need to be some form of fixed heating, which can probably, what we think it'll be is that it needs to get up to the World Health Organization standards, which is 18 degrees. So as long as you've got a fixed heating source which can get to 18 degrees, that should be enough. So that's what we've been advising or talking to the government departments involved in this, and we hope that will be their recommendation to government, not just heat pumps in, because they are expensive to put in.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a hard question, I guess, on what you just said there, but what would you be advice to someone now who's either just brought a home or they want to get it better, somewhere near the standards before they tenant it, right now, is it just sit and wait and do nothing, or just do what's sensible?
Well, it depends. If there's no insulation at all, you need to have that insulation in by July 2019, so you might as well do it right now. Have a look at the rent you can charge for it as well, because the rent will go up with it, and so it could be cost effective to actually do that. You might as well put it in. However, if you've got a property where you've got insulation in the property but it's to the previous standards, not the current standards, we don't know whether you'll need to put it up to that or not.
So maybe wait in that case. Problem or whatever.
Exactly. It's going to take a little while, actually. The policy advisors tell us that there's going to be a consultation process. So we've already been talking to them, but there's going to be a public consultation, and they imagine that's going to take at least 6 months to undertake. Okay. Then they will put their advice, wrap it all up, and put it to government. Government will then debate it and see what it is. But it really is up to MB, the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, to say what those regulations are going to be. Yep. They've been the ones delegated that authority. But it could be at least another year before we actually find out exactly what these things are. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a wee tip I picked up there. I mean, just when you're talking there, if you do own a property, you have insulated it to the really high standards or whatever, when you advertise it, tell the people. Absolutely. Because as you said, your rent can be or will be higher than a place that's sitting there cold and no insulation at all.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, you have to put it in your tenancy agreement now, exactly what insulation is in there. But you're right, it's a selling point.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you say that this is a warm, dry home and it's got this amount of insulation in it, that's a selling point, and people do pay more for it.
Yeah.
So you might as well have that extra dollars as well. Yeah.
Well, good. So what other issues the government discussing now that other things that we haven't talked about you think might be worth mentioning in this sort of forum here?
Well, I guess the capital gains tax is coming forward as well. I don't think there's any doubt that the government, at the election anyway, were keen to introduce the capital gain tax. Whether they do or not, we don't know. But they have set up an advisory group to look into it, and they have said that is one of the things they want them to look at. Yeah. So we'll be definitely talking to that group and putting forward the idea that you cannot keep adding these regulations and costs without seeing rents go up, and you're actually going to be hurting the people that you're trying to help. So that's the message we're going to be going. We don't know whether it's going to happen or not. We don't know whether the working group will put forward a recommendation for it or not, and if they do, we don't know whether the government will actually take that up anyway. So it's really is crystal ball gazing at the moment. We just don't know how it's going to go. Right. But there does seem to be a lot more information now showing that it's hard for tenants to get a property. There's not as much supply, and the rents are going up at a faster rate.
The Labor government, the League government might sort of find, I think.
That's exactly it. So I'm hoping that they will realise that you can't just keep adding these costs on and not have ramifications.
Did they realise it? Annoys me a lot. But do the government realise that traders and people that sell property, they do pay tax, they do pay GST, they... on the whole, I mean, some people don't, and the ones that don't probably going to hide. They're crazy and probably going to hide it anyway. So that's not going to stop them. So the property investors, they do pay a hell of a lot of tax on the way through. I guess the living in your own property for 2 years or 5 years or whatever, the rules are there is probably a different story, I guess, on the same. But it just annoys me going, people do pay tax. So I've been paying tax as a trader for 10 years myself. And there's a lot of people around like me.
Absolutely. And I mean, they do know that, but I think they're looking to their constituents and their voter base. And we need to, I mean, we're trying really hard, but it's not easy to try and get down to the media that look, this isn't actually the way it is. We're not. It's difficult, but we are doing the best we can. We certainly try and get into the media as much as possible, and we have been I think getting more successful on it. But you raised the other point about the bright line test. That was something else which is coming in.
Yes.
Don't quite know when, but it will be, and so that's extending the period where if you buy a property and then you sell it, even if you buy it as an investment property, a rental property, if you sell it within 2 years, you have to pay a tax on income tax on the difference between what you bought it for and what you sell it for.
Yeah.
The government are looking to increase that from 2 years to 5 years. Now, I think most people would actually keep that rental property for longer than 5 years, so it shouldn't be a problem for most people. But what it does do is it reduces flexibility. If you can only say, you've bought your property and that's it, and you can't afford anything more, but there's another property which comes up which is better, and you would actually make more money, pay more tax if you bought that property, but you need to sell the first one.
Yes.
Now you're being hit with a tax which no other investment actually has to pay. We think it's really unjust, and so we're definitely talking against it. And again, it's just one of those things which makes it a little more difficult to actually provide rental property to tenants, and that's what we do. That's what our industry is all about, providing homes for people.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the 2-year rule is fair enough, and it probably does pick up those the people that do trade property and don't declare it or whatever. So it does pick those people up. So they are getting there. Once they keep it at 2 years, they're keeping the capital gains. Taxes happening anyway.
Yep.
By 5 years, it's almost going to make people be crafty and do illegal stuff that they shouldn't be even thinking about doing.
But it could. I hope not. But you're right.
But, okay. No, interesting. And probably the last question I'll ask before I talk to you about tenants and stuff is the overseas foreign buyers. I personally don't think it's going to have a major mark on the market.
No.
Because they still haven't. They're sort of not backtracked, but they're still deciding now, aren't they?
Look, they are, and so they haven't come up with anything yet. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. And even if it does come in, and it looks as if it will, and there is a ban on foreign buyers or on what they can do. Like they're really looking at if they build, they're allowed to build, but they have to sell within a year. The Minister Twyford has also already talked recently about changing that, and they might not have their all their bits in the right order for that. So he is starting to backtrack on things, which is good. These ministers, they can come up with ideas, and they think they're great ideas. The best kind of MP is one who says, I think this is the best thing to do, but when faced with good information which says actually that might not be the best thing to do, they listen to it and they act. The media gives them all a hard time for doing that, but personally I think it's a great thing. I think it shows a lot of courage and intelligence to actually say, okay, I think we got that a bit wrong, or we didn't get it wrong, but it was just not quite right, and we can change it and to make it better. It would be good if they do that.
And as I said earlier on, the people are out there, they're campaigning and they say what they think and maybe they want to vote or two, but we're going to get something like now Labor, government are faced with those issues. It's good they aren't rushing in, and probably the one thing I'm happy about is actually seeing them, exactly what you said then, actually stopping back and thinking and go, okay, there is a bigger picture here that we didn't really know about or think about when we thought of these. But
look, even if it does come in and there are fewer overseas buyers, it's not going to be the end of the world.
No, I don't see it.
They're not. No, they're not that big a part of the market that's going to make a dramatic difference, really.
The 1 year thing for me was interesting because what if they can't sell the house? Simple question I have immediately. So I don't know how that would work. But
it's true. There's lots of little bits of detail that you think something's a great idea, but when you actually drill down and you start looking at the detail and the ramifications and things like that, often it just needs a bit of tidying up, really. And if they do that, I think that's great.
Okay, just with where the market is at the moment, and it's similar but different than previous cycles. There's a lot of reason why this time I think there's going to be a major crash like it's happened in the last 2 decades, 3 decades. Going back, the rental market throughout New Zealand, I call small town New Zealand, seems to be what I've seen very buoyant, shortage of rentals, and the rents going really high. Auckland seems to be a bit all over the place. Sometimes it is this time of year, it's hard to get rentals, but before Christmas and probably soon it won't be as bad. Maybe I'm talking to different type of property than others talk about, I don't know, but certainly very hot outside of Auckland and the smaller town New Zealand. How long do you see that going? I remember 10 years ago that happened, there was a shortage, and then when the market peaked, all of a sudden there were plenty of places to rent and what have you. I don't know how or why that happened, but I don't know if you can comment on what I've sort of talked about there, more so outside of Auckland, what's going on. Because the market's also very hot still in some parts of outside of Auckland. It's slowed down in some parts. They seem to go hand in hand a little bit.
Yeah, they do. I think when the market peaks, you'll find a lot of people are trying to sell their properties, and so they've got them on the market, they haven't rented them out, so they haven't got any tenants in them at the moment while they're trying to sell them. And then when they can't sell them, they turn them back into rentals again, and so you end up with a bit of an oversupply. So that may happen. It'll be interesting to see whether it does or not. But we do. I mean, in Auckland's so difficult to predict because we have a lot of tenants look as if they're moving in with each other. There's a lot of overcrowding going on. It's been happening for a number of years, and there's only so much so many people can get into a property really. And so it's important that we do actually, on our tenancy agreements, we limit the amount of people then. So if we do find out that the overcrowding is going on, we can actually put an end to it because it's not great for the property and the market. But I think that's been happening for so long now that we're kind of full really. All the houses. I don't think they get any more people.
No room at the inn.
No room at the inn. No. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Auckland as to whether the now that we can't get any more people in there, whether that will in fact mean that, and people get sick of living on top of each other. Of course, no one wants to live in overcrowded conditions. So with things like the increase in the accommodation supplement. And some of the other grants which are going towards what do you call them, the unemployment benefits and things like that, that may actually make it easier for these tenants to go, I don't want to live in these overcrowded conditions anymore, and start looking for other accommodation solutions. So there could be in Auckland a lot of people actually trying to find new solutions, and that could actually stimulate demand and mean that without that increase in supply, we could start seeing some increases in rental prices. I think we all need to everyone needs to actually look at rental market and make sure that you are charging what the market really does will provide. Because I don't think a lot of people, once they get a tenant in and then they forget about putting up rents and things like that, as long as the tenant's there, they're happy. And it can go years and years and years without a rent increase. And once you're doing that, you're just subsidising the tenant. You're not maximising. Well, you don't even have to maximise. You're actually losing money. So the best thing is to keep up with that rental market and keep your rents up to date. If they're a really good tenant, maybe you'll give them a little bit of a discount on that to keep them there. Make sure they know it so they know you're a good landlord and you're actually giving them the benefit. But do keep them up. Don't let them drop too far down.
Good advice, very good advice. Bit of crystal balling, and it's an unfair question to ask anyone, I guess, but you're here now, so why not? I'm asking the questions today. The market, and obviously, as I said, the rest of the country has still followed Auckland's growth, and some parts are still going very well, and some have slowed finally. Auckland, for the next 12 to 18 months, where do you see things in Auckland for the property market?
Look, it's a really difficult question to answer at the moment because there's so many different things going on. It makes it in a period of flux. No. My feeling is that it'll all come down to the immigration or the migration figures. We've got record migration up to 72,000 per year. It's just starting to slow down now. Which you would expect if you go back and have a look at history. Migration you tend to get a boom and it lasts for about 4 or 5 years, and it's finished. And then you can even sometimes go negative a little bit, and then it goes on for a little period, and then we have another bit of a boom. And it's often the prompt which actually triggers the increase in property prices and that property cycle movement. So you would expect that will kind of go down a bit. The economy will probably change a little bit. Going a little bit negative. Australia is starting to pick up a little bit, so perhaps it may change and you start getting more people going to Australia, fewer people coming back, and that number could go down. Now if it does, and if we are building a hell of a lot more houses, we could end up with a oversupply basically. But if that number keeps going, and I don't think we will have I just can't see that the government will be able to build 100,000 extra houses over the next 10 years.
Well, that's part of the trouble with what you're saying. I think, with immigration, I don't see it going backwards or slow down a little bit, but not too much. We have such a need for more workers over in New Zealand. We're so short of workers.
That's exactly it.
And it's such a desirable place in the world. These two major things there that are going to continue to see. But can we look after them and house them all and get them on our busy Auckland roads? Probably not.
Probably not. I mean, there will be. We do need to spend more money on infrastructure. We always have, and the Auckland Council going through that at the moment. They're asking questions of the public. Do you want to have a congestion tax or something like that, or rates increase and things like that, to try and actually fix this problem? So it'll be interesting to see what the population actually comes up with there, and whether they're willing to put a few more dollars into to fix the problem. Personally, I think we need migration. We need them coming in, and I hope it continues. But you just don't know. So depending on whether Labor can actually build the houses they say they're going to do, I doubt it. And whether migration does fall off, it probably will, but it'll depend on the rate, and that's really is crystal ball gazing. You just so many different factors come into that. But my feeling is that the market has, it's quieted down over the last year, and that's, it's quite good. It provides lots of good opportunities.
It was unhealthy.
Absolutely.
3 years ago.
Yeah. It's, personally, the worst time for investing, I think, is when the market's really hot, because it's just, you put an offer in and someone else gazumps it, and it's just hard work. I always think that the best time to buy is when the market's flat and people aren't there, and you can actually get bargains and things like that. So, in that point of view, it's quite good if we actually do go into that period. Can't see it crashing though.
No. Likewise with you. That's all good. Well, good to hear. Good justification. And two questions really finish up is what's the biggest potential issue you see for investors in 2018? What's the biggest? I suppose this comes down to what we spoke about. Depends on what the government does.
It does really, and we are going to be working hard with the government, and they do seem to be willing to talk to us as well, which is fantastic. And so we will have our 10 cents worth to go into that. But there's also going to be things like there's the Osaki case, which hasn't on tenant damage, which hasn't quite been sorted yet, nearly, but not quite. And there's also the situation of unlawful properties, which again it seems to have been sorted out, but not quite. We still need government to come along and actually confirm that there was a district court appeals case in Dunedin, and that basically said that the problem, it really did sort the problem out from the Tenancy Tribunal's point of view, which is fantastic. But we need government to actually come in and say that that's what they believe as well. They back up that court ruling, and that'll stop other courts from coming in with a different ruling. And courts are, over the last 2 years I've found out just how...
Another 2 hours, we have another podcast.
Absolutely. And they're trouble actually. So that's a big thing. I think from an investor's point of view though, I think we really need to start thinking about our returns. The properties that we've got, I think we need to look at what their market rent is and get it up. And if there's things that your tenant wants and is willing to pay for an extra rent, do it. Get it in there and get your rents up as much as possible, because there's a lot of costs and regulations and things which are probably in the pipeline. We might as well start getting ready for it now and getting our yields up. So I think that will be the prime focus, I think, for this year.
That's good. You've always answered the next question, and the same as what's the biggest opportunity for investors in 2018, I guess, on the rental side.
I think
places the tenants want, or what's going to make it more desirable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are, as the market flattens, which I think is good. It does provide opportunities for buying good bargains. Absolutely. So that is great. But also look for ones where you can actually increase the yield and get the rent up. There'll be a lot of people who are selling who perhaps don't know what a true market rent is, and if you can, if you buy on what looks like a low yield, you can put the rent up and actually can turn it immediately into a good buy, just because the seller didn't know what the rent truly was. Yeah,
absolutely. Yes, good point to look out for when you're buying property. Great stuff. I'll know exactly what you're going to say here, but any advice for any new new purchase or new people to invest in who are watching this video right now?
Yeah, well, I think, we've pretty much covered it really, haven't we? I think the best thing is to go in there, look for bargains, never pay too much for your property. It means you don't have to borrow, cuts down your risks. So look for bargains, look for ways you can increase value, and if you can buy something that is currently under rented, then that will be fantastic too, because you will be able to put it up to the market rents and get a much better yield. So look for those opportunities, really.
Great answer. I was sure you were going to say join the local PIA.
I could do that. Isn't that obvious? No, but actually, of course, okay, I'll do a plug. Thank you very much for that, Mark. Yeah, look, join your local Property Investors Association. They're a fantastic way of meeting other people and just talking about property. A lot of people there say that they're properholics because they just love getting in there and talking about property.
Absolutely.
And even though you think it's it's a competitive market, it's so big that people don't mind sharing their information and things like that. And you know that, Mark. And it's a great way to actually get in there, find out what's going on. But you're also supporting the industry as well. Every time you join a Property Investors Association around the country, there's 19 of them, part of your fee actually goes to supporting the Property Investors Federation, and so that pays for all the advocacy work that we do actually do. So it provides for we hope anyway, for a much better industry that we can actually work in and provide these homes at a good price, but for a good profit for us as well, and provide these homes for the tenants, and that's what we really want.
Great stuff. Well, thank you very much, Andrew, for your time today, and maybe I'm still here in 4 years doing these. We'll get you back for another State of the Nation.
Oh, that'd be great, Mark. Yeah, it'd be excellent.
So I hope you enjoyed today. Any questions, send through, and I can contact Andrew if I need to, but go to the Property Ventures NZ Facebook page. We are pushing that again with little wee video tips and pieces. We're starting the Ask Mark series again, which we did in November last year. They're starting again in another week, and they'll be doing it for 6 or 7 months. We've got prizes from Ramada Suites. We're giving away 2 free nights prizes for the next 6 months. So watch for that on the weekly newsletter coming out again tomorrow and next week. And apart from that, happy investing. Thank you again, Andrew, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks, man.